On this edition of Independent Sources, street vendor validation. Could relief be coming for entrepreneurs selling from carts and trucks who feel they are victims of New York's quality of life crackdown?
Hopefully, the voices of the vendors and their supporters, all of us who buy food from vendors every day, are the voices that are going to be heard by the city council people and by the mayor.
And Exploring Africa, an after-school program in the Bronx, aims to make up for the lack of African history in the curriculum.
We learn about all these Europeans, and it's just natural for the white students to feel like they're included in the curriculum, and then we're just off to the side learning about their history like our history isn't everybody else's history.
Those stories and more coming up on Independent Sources. Welcome to Independent Sources, bringing you news from New York's ethnic and immigrant communities. I'm Abi Ishola. The street vendors you see every day, fancy food trucks, flower stands, even street artists, operate in a tangled web of regulation. Confusing rules lead to what many describe as excessive fines and tickets. And the limited number of licenses has led to a punishing black market. Sean Basinski is the director of the Street Vendor Project, an organization representing more than 1,000 vendors. Sarah Pizan spoke with him about some of these issues, as well as the possible city council legislation to remedy them.
Thanks for being with us today, Sean.
Thanks for having me.
So, Sean, it seems that there are two issues that are making life a lot tougher for street vendors, and it's the black market and permit caps. So let's start with why is there a black market for street vendors?
So those are sort of two sides of the same coin, right? The black market exists because there's a cap on the number of permits that are available. So back in 1981, the City Council, the New York City Council got together, and they were being asked by a bunch of big businesses to do this, and so they did it. They put a cap for the first time ever. They put a limit on the number of mobile food vending permits. That's what you need to have on the side of your push cart or truck in the whole city. At 3,000 permits, another 1,000 for the summer, so 3,000 or 4,000 depending on how you count.
Okay.
And so for 34 years now, if my math is right, there have been this number of permits in the city. Because the demand is so much greater than the supply, there's a black market that's developed. And so both of these are part of the same problem that we're trying to change.
I see. And so who are these street vendors? Where do they come from, most of them?
Oh, well, vendors, we see them every day. They are 95% or more of them are immigrants from around the world. It's an amazingly diverse community that we're so proud of as New Yorkers. We do our meetings at the Street Vendor Project in 5 languages each month.
Impressive.
Which is, it's not cheap, but it's so important that our diverse community is heard. And so, yeah, vendors come from Bangladesh, from Egypt, from Senegal, from China, from Mexico, from Ecuador. Many of them come from this country as well, a growing number of folks who want to get started in the food business. They might have their culinary degree, they might have their MBA, whatever it is. They want to open a business, but it's so hard in New York City because rents are so high. So the first thing they do is they get a cart or a truck, and they start serving food or other things on the street. And this has been going on in New York City for more than 100 years. It's a great part of our culture here.
Let's talk again about the black market. I know in the past there's been an attempted crackdown right at this black market, and it seems that the vendors themselves, not the permit holders, are actually fined, right, when there's an issue. So why is that?
So it's a little bit complicated to keep track of it all. But basically, the city has tried various things over the years to try to fix this black market without increasing the actual number of permits, and they've all failed. They've all failed. So right now, they are actually writing tickets to the permit owner as opposed to the worker at the cart.
Oh.
You might think that would help, except what happens is that the permit owner, who is not even a vendor anymore, somebody who might be driving a taxi or living out of state, then just charges the actual worker more for that permit every 2 years. And so, you know, people can develop workarounds. That's what's happened. That's why we think the best real option is to increase the number of permits that are available So instead of having to go to somebody else on the black market, well, you can just march down there to the city licensing center at 42 Broadway, and the city will give you a permit to operate a mobile food vending business. Well, isn't that the best thing?
Right. And so how much is a permit?
A permit only costs $200. Now there's classes you have to take. There's lots of regulation, but the actual cost is low. And the reason is because vendors, by definition, are low-income people who are just getting started out. We want to keep the costs for them low because one day we know, hopefully, they're going to grow and have a restaurant of their own.
Right. So what's being done to alleviate these permit holders' stranglehold?
What we at the Street Vendor Project would like to have done, and many city council members have said that they're supportive, is to change that 3,000 permit cap.
Right.
And give out permits to people that need them. If you can go and get a permit, then you don't need to go to the black market, and it's going to dry up. It's not easy, though, right? Because there still are big businesses who say that there are right now too many vendors on the street. They think that they control our sidewalks, our public spaces. That's not the case. So hopefully the voices of the vendors and their supporters, all of us who buy food from vendors every day, are the voices that are going to be heard by the city council people and by the mayor.
Why isn't there a law that says that if you want to maintain your permit, you have to actually be working in your cart, right? In vending. That'd be too sensible. That'd make too much sense. We've actually asked the health department to do such a rule for many years, and they've said that they're not concerned with what happens behind the scenes. All they care about is if the food is up to temperature and all the sanitary rules that they abide by. So that would be one solution, but it would only be a partial solution, actually, because there'd still be that permit cap. And so, but it's a good idea, and it probably makes too much sense for it to actually happen in New York City. So tell us a little bit about your organization and how you're pushing for change.
Yeah, so the Street Vendor Project is a worker center. So it's sort of like a union or an advocacy group for all the people who sell. There's about 20,000 people who sell food and merchandise on our sidewalks every day in New York City. So we help them with their individual problems, legal and small business issues that they face. But more importantly, we organize vendors really to have a voice on issues just like this, issues that affect them in their daily lives as they struggle to try to make ends meet, but also affect us all as New Yorkers because we all buy things from vendors every day. Most of us do.
I do.
And tourists as well. And so really we think that helping vendors is going to help all of us and make New York City a better place. So it's not just a limited issue, it's really an issue that we think deserves wide attention.
And how is the current mayor's administration reacting to this issue?
Well, we haven't met with the mayor himself. We hope that he's going to be amenable to reform. We know that he's had a progressive vision for New York City that says that the people that have, for so many years been kept outside of the decision-making processes, who have not had power, now are being sometimes invited inside. And we know that, for vendors, it's an issue of justice, economic justice on behalf of oftentimes the most marginalized people in our city, immigrants and low-income people who are sometimes hated and despised by the most powerful big businesses who don't want them there. And so, we think that it's a message, an issue that will resonate well with the new mayor, still relatively new mayor. Some of the members of his team have met with us, and we appreciate their support. So, but it's still up in the air, really, what's going to happen, and so that's why we're fighting every day to organize more vendors and more people who care about vendors.
I know there's also another issue that's affecting street vendors, and that's the safety of their carts. I know Move System has come up with a new eco-friendly cart, and I know that there was 500 of them distributed recently to some food vendors. How are these new eco-friendly cards going to affect the business of vendors in general in the city?
Yeah, well, we think it could be a good thing. It's very true that many times the vending carts are old. They're operating on old technology, which is often unsafe for the vendors themselves, who are who are already on the street, suffering from the weather, breathing the soot and the car diesel exhaust, and breathing in all these fumes. So a company came around and said, "Hey, we have an idea for a new technology to put these carts on the street. It's an optional thing for the vendors. If they want to get a cart from this company, they can do so. And if they think it's good for them, they will do so. And it could be really nice to have new carts out there being provided by this private company. Hopefully it's going to be good for the vendors, and we think it's going to be good for their health if they do it. And we're not, we have no financial interest. We're not a private company. We're a nonprofit organization. But it's interesting and it could be exciting. And so that's why we say, hey, whatever is good for the health of our street vendors who work so hard is a good thing.
Well, that's great. Well, we wish you luck in your movement, and thank you for joining us.
Well, thanks so much for having me.
Sarah is here with me now to tell you what's trending this week. Sarah, what's new?
No more polystyrene foam. Starting July 1st, New York restaurants will have to comply with Mayor de Blasio's latest green measure. But the upcoming shift is causing a lot of backlash from business owners.
Why are the owners upset?
So they're upset because they say that switching from foam containers to plastic containers is going to be a real cost. For example, buying 500 small foam containers costs $13, while buying 250 plastic containers costs $50.
Oh my God.
So the margin is very big.
Yeah.
And they're so upset that actually 500 businesses have filed a petition asking Mayor de Blasio to actually revert his decision. And foam is cheaper, but foam is cheaper than plastic, but it's also super difficult to recycle.
How so?
So in order for foam to be recycled, you have to wash it first. And there's no business right now in the United States that does this on a large scale. And in New York City alone, we have 29,000 ton of foam waste every year.
So how's the city responding?
So the city's Department of Sanitation said the measure should actually not imply any real cost increase. But they do say that if businesses can demonstrate that they are struggling, financially struggling because of this, then they will be, they could obtain an exemption.
Wow. So we'll keep an eye out on that story, right?
Yeah.
If you're a parent wondering how the city's new standalone pre-K centers work, DNAinfo.com might have the answers you need.
So what's a standalone pre-K center?
Well, basically, standalone pre-K centers are run by the Department of Education. They're centers where they, get children into one space as a pre-K school, but they're putting them in public schools. The principals of those schools are not running the centers. So they're run by different officials that they haven't appointed just yet.
Ooh.
And they plan to have about 6,700 seats for students.
Well, how did the parents feel about this?
Well, a lot of the parents are not happy right now because they're not getting any communication from the Department of Education about who's running the school. Right. And part of that, as I said before, is because they haven't staffed the centers yet. They're in the midst of doing that now.
If you're used to driving in the city, then you can agree on one thing. Parking is a nightmare, especially when you have to do endless runs around blocks hunting for a space to park. Here to solve this challenge, a new app called SpotPog that allows people who own a private driveway or a parking spot to rent it out to strangers.
Wow, that's really cool. How does it work?
So basically, people who use the app can rent out their driveway or their parking spot. They can set up their own price and their own availability for that spot. Demand is going to drive the price, but also people who use the app can use it to swap public spaces. So let's say you use the app to, park somewhere. As soon as you vacate that spot, you let somebody know, you let the app know that you vacated the spot, and you can earn what's called POGs, which is credit, so that you can use those credit to then pay for your next parking place.
So cool. How are people reacting to it?
The feedback has been amazing. People really love this kind of community-based solution to parking problems around the city. And, they say that it's definitely going to reduce traffic congestion and also street-level pollution. So.
Yeah. Well, I will definitely be looking into it. Living in Brooklyn, I would need something like that. In this city, renting a workspace can prove to be pretty expensive. One artist, however, decided to build his own using shipping containers.
Shipping containers?
Yes, shipping containers. Vedat Ugen, native of Turkey and a Pratt University graduate, purchased 5 shipping containers, painted them different bright colors, and employed the help of architect Deger Sengiz to create a 2-story structure. And basically, they're stacked on top of each other. They're really, really cool. And inside, there's a woodwork shop, offices he has for him and his assistants, a storage area, bathroom, and an enclosed workspace that prevents fumes from spray and some of the chemicals that he uses from filtering out. Wow. So this is like a full-fledged art studio.
Yeah, that sounds really, really cool.
Very cool. And they're so cool to look at, and they're not welded together, they're bolted together so he can take them apart, rearrange them. So he calls them Legos for adults.
That's pretty neat.
Very nice.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's it for this week. Be sure to tweet us at IndieSources, #Abby and Sarah.
And tell us what's buzzing in your community. Up next, Africa After School. Welcome back to Independent Sources. Kedra Jiba is an English teacher at the Ethical Culture Fieldston School in the Bronx. When she noticed a lack of strong curriculum in African history at the school, she sprang into action, creating a class that teaches about the continent's rich history. This year, she took the program even a step further by organizing a trip to Ghana in which students were fully immersed in the arts and culture of the region. I sat down with Jiba, along with a student in the class, Malachi Hart, and his mother, to discuss the program and their exciting West African adventure. Thanks for everyone being on the show.
Thanks for having us.
Sure. And Kedra, you have an after-school program, and you teach a group of 10 students about African history. Tell us a bit more about the program.
The name of the program is Africans in the Diaspora, and it exists in a middle school, but we have high school students as well as middle school students attend. And it's something that grew out of a demand to have African history taught at school. And one day, I was at a pizza shop and I noticed a number of the parents of the students that I teach at the pizza shop, and I said, I'd like to take students to Ghana. And I asked them what they thought about that, and they said, when's the trip?
Wow.
And yeah, so that's where it began, at least at the school. And we organized to actually have a program where students could go to Ghana. That's how it started. But prior to that, parents had what's called Black School for their children, because there was not really a lot of teaching about Africans at the school at all. And if so, it was somewhat pathological or negative, from what I understand. And
it's usually about slavery and those kinds of things.
Yeah, about slavery. And we obviously talk about slavery, but we also talk about resistance. And the students really, I felt, got a lot out of it, and they applied a lot of what they were learning to what's going on today. And Malachi will probably be able to talk about that as well. But
can you talk about that now?
Especially since we go to a predominantly white school, we never get the chance to talk about Africa or Black people for that matter. Like, especially in history, there's only been one course that we've talked about African people, and that was just for one paper.
Yeah.
And
how did that make you feel?
It's actually, I've actually kind of gotten used to it, which is horrible, because we learn about all these Europeans, and it's just natural for the white students to feel like they're included in the curriculum, and then we're just kind of off to the side learning about their history like it's not like our history isn't everybody else's history. And in Miss Jiba's after school program, it felt like we were really included in
the conversation about history, right?
Yeah.
And Robin, how important was it for you to have him take this sort of class?
Critical. It was critical. It's particularly important in the light of current events in our country. The police shootings that are happening and those kinds of things, they're at a place where they need to understand what's happening in this country, and they needed a place where they could have those discussions within the context of a very positive identity development context. And I think Africans in Diaspora was very much focused on resistance and about Pan-Africanism. So It allowed the children to feel like they had connection to a larger resistance movement, and that they were not so isolated. I thought that was critical for them.
Yeah. And you all recently went to Ghana. How was the trip?
We did. It was wonderful.
What kinds of things did you do?
Wow. Okay, so we have, Robin mentioned Pan-Africanism. I have an organization that's called Pan-African Youth, and it's committed to building solidarity amongst youth, African youth. And the students have pen pals that they have been in communication with since the beginning of the school year.
Wow.
And
so this was before even going to Ghana?
Yeah, this was before going. They had a chance to communicate via letter. And they sent pictures, and they learned a little bit about each other before actually meeting. So I think that was a really big highlight for the students. And what was also really nice about it is that parents, a number of the parents joined as well. Robin also joined us, and they also made connections with the pen pals' relatives, adult relatives. And it was just really nice, I think, for them to have that kind of connection upon entry into Ghana. And we did a lot of other things as well.
What do you remember most about the trip, Malachi?
Well, I mostly remember going to the slave dungeons where slaves were kept before being shipped off to the Americas. We went there with our pen pals. These pen pals we had just seen for the first time that day, and it really brought us together because although they weren't shipped off with us, with our families, they still saw their brothers and sisters, ancestors being shipped off, and it kind of tied us all together, although none of us really would go through the same experience, although racism and slavery still impacts them to this day, just like it does us here.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting for us to see the difference between how it impacts mainland Africa and the diaspora.
Wow. You're very well versed. Robin, have you seen any changes in him since taking the course and going to Ghana?
He's really self-possessed. I think he's very confident, very sure of himself. And now he has a knowledge base with which to, connect his experiences that validates his own experiences. Yeah, he's grown a lot.
Wow.
Yeah.
And as a parent going to Ghana with him, what was that experience like for you?
It's interesting being a white woman in that context because, for obvious reasons, but I think it was important to be witness to his own experience and to bring that back home with us. It was a very powerful experience and painfully powerful experience for everyone, I think. At least that piece of it was. It's something that we will always share, and that's a tremendous thing. It's quite a gift.
Nice. So what were some of the fun things you guys did? Africans love making things. Did you do anything like artsy in that way?
We witnessed kente cloth being made, and some of us tried it. I'm not sure if you did, Malachi.
No, I
Oh, you didn't? But you did make beads.
Nice.
So we made beads out of glass, which was very interesting.
Yeah, we ended up using tree bark to make ink, and we dipped like these sort of stamp things onto kente cloth using different Adinkra symbols, which meant all sorts of different things like love and freedom and all these other words onto these kente cloths, and we got to keep them, which was really cool. I think I made one for my brother that had like self-determination all over it.
Oh, wow. So what's next for the program? You guys have done great things so far.
We have, and it's interesting. I think that we had a little bit of a struggle getting it off the ground at the school. It was new. There are lots of obstacles that the students and the parents really, and me, we all fought for this program. Now, I'm going to move to Chicago.
You are?
I am. And however, the program will stay at the school. Another person will lead the program. and they're very interested in keeping it alive. So we started it, we were the first, and it will continue. And I hope to also start another or participate in a program that's similar in Chicago where I will teach next school year.
Very great. And then it's also being documented, right?
It is being documented. So we have a wonderful documentarian. His name is Larry Buskey, and he has Headroom Media. And the documentary will come out. We're not exactly sure when, but very soon. Since the story keeps unfolding, he might actually be recording for a little while longer than we thought.
Well, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you all for being on the show. Keidra Jiba, Malachi Hart, and Robin Hart.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank you for having us.
No problem.
Thank you.
That's our show this week. Thanks for staying tuned. Till next time, be independent-minded.